All right, good evening and welcome to the City of Sunbury Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It is September 28th, 2023. It is 6:30 p.m. Would you please join me in a moment of silent prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance? Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor St. John.
Here.
Mr. Gokenhour.
Here.
Mrs. Cooper.
Here.
Mr. Lawrence.
Here.
Mr. Rabbit.
Here.
Mrs. Miller.
Here. All right, we're going to start with the public hearing tonight. It is related to a zoning code amendment. And the anticipated process is we're going to initially send it to our law director. I believe we're going to send it to our court reporter to swear folks in. And then Mr. Whitney is going to enter some exhibits. Anything to start with, Mr. Whitney?
Just that, I think, Mr. Mayor. So as the mayor indicated, we are in a public hearing this evening, and we do have a stenographer here who is taking record. I don't know who all may be planning on speaking at the public hearing portion of this. I think a few of you might be here for the second item on the agenda, but anyone that does wish to speak at the public hearing portion, please stand at this time, and the court reporter, the stenographer, is going to swear us in at this point. So, and that would include any staff members.
That would include Lisa.
Yeah, and good point, Mayor. Ms. Duffy Rogers is appearing remotely here tonight at the request of the commission, and so she is also being sworn in at this time as well.
The testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under the promise of perjury.
I do.
I do.
So the first order of business then, Mayor, is I would move to admit into the record document I've marked as Exhibit A, which is the public notice that was posted in accordance with the requirements of the Sunbury zoning ordinance in anticipation of tonight's hearing. And then I have document marked as Exhibit B, which is contains the proposed amendment that the commission is considering tonight at the public hearing. So without objection, I would move to admit these into the record.
Very good. Thank you. I would like to hand it to Ms. Rogers Duffy, or Duffy Rogers, excuse me, to maybe give us an overview of the changes since our last particular meeting. We received some feedback from the commission, and I know you've helped us incorporate that into the new text that we're looking to approve this evening. Would you mind covering the changes and any other commentary?
Yes, sir. I will bring up my presentation and share my screen.
Thank you.
Are y'all seeing it?
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. So good evening. I am Elisa Duffy Rogers with CT Consultants. Please feel free to interrupt me and to ask questions anytime during this presentation if the chair is comfortable with that approach. So tonight we will review the revisions to the limited industrial district since we had our conversations back in August, as well as there are revisions to the definitions chapter, as well as other zoning ordinance sections such as zoning certificates, the conditions of premises and waste accumulation, and the sign regulations. And then I will close and entertain any other comments or questions. As we discussed last month, other amendments to the zoning ordinance are necessary to effectuate the limited industrial district. I will present the changes to those associated amendments before I discuss the changes to the district itself. Based on the conversations that we had back in August, I have added amendments to the definition sections for solar energy systems, including definitions for integrated, rooftop, and ground-mounted systems. The section governing the approval of zoning certificates is being amended to allow the city council to approve zoning certificates by resolution instead of by ordinance. Based on our conversations in August, I also revised the existing zoning regulations that restrict waste accumulations to ensure that they apply to all non-residential structures, not just commercial ones. I also updated the sign regulations to include the new limited industrial district to ensure current sign regulations are based and regulated based on zoning districts. At this time, I will turn to revisions to the limited industrial district itself. We made several changes to the development standards table. First, we revised the text in the table to clarify which streets within the city would be required to have the large 250-foot front setback. And those are the streets designated by the Ohio Department of Transportation, such as major collectors, major and minor arterials, expressways, and those sorts of things. And those are your major gateways into the street, into the city. We have reduced the front setback for major and minor collectors to 100 feet, since those are not your major gateways into the city. As we discussed back in August, we've added text to permit small guardhouses in the front setback. And finally, we permitted rooftop mechanical enclosures to exceed the maximum height by 10 feet. And those are the changes to the development standards table. We also made several revisions to the landscape and design standards based on our conversations last month. Last month, we talked about the screening of rooftop equipment specifically for solar energy systems. We have now required that all solar energy systems be screened unless they are integrated systems. Integrated solar panel systems are the ones like you see in the top photograph. And most often those are when the solar panels are actually the building materials themselves. And in that top photograph, those are actually the roof shingles themselves that act as both the shingles and the solar panels as well. The photograph that you see below that is for actually roof mounted solar energy systems, and those would be required to be screened by this revised regulation. We are also requiring any other solar energy systems that may protrude from the sides of buildings to be screened unless they are integrated into the siding, for example. As I mentioned, we have now included the limited industrial district within your sign regulations. However, your existing sign regulations allow rooftop signs and billboards within your industrial districts. They would be prohibited within the limited industrial district. Your existing sign regulations also limit the height of wall signs on buildings to 25 feet. But given the height of the buildings within the limited industrial district, that prohibition has been removed. And we are just simply stating that wall signs cannot exceed the parapet or the rooftop. Based on the changes that we made to define the streets more clearly within the development standards table, all of the landscaping standards have been changed to reference that new language. In addition to that, we talked last time that the black 4-rail fence has not been defined as what is appropriate for the fencing along your major gateways and entries into the city. So to reflect that, we have now changed that language in all of the appropriate sections to say that they must be constructed in accordance with the Sunbury Limited Industrial Administrative Policy, which will be developed subsequent to this ordinance. And so therefore, at that time, the details for the fence can be prescribed. Also, based on the conversations we had back in August, we have now required that there are any material changes to all the hazardous materials that may be on a site. The city has to be notified by that. In addition, we are requiring that facilities who are cited for violations to their hazardous materials policies be provided, that we provided that notice as well to the city. We also added nuisance standards for heat, noise, vibration, smoke, odors, air pollution, liquid waste, noxious, toxic, and corrosive fumes, radioactive or electrical disturbances, and liquid waste and medical waste as well. And again, that was based on our conversations that we had back in August, and we were concerned that your existing nuisance regulations did not adequately handle those types of nuisances. We also added standards for on-site generators, which many industrial facilities have in case of power interruptions. We are requiring a setback of 100 feet from agricultural and residential districts as well as uses. We're requiring a noise study. We're asking that or demanding that the testing hours be limited because generators have to be tested periodically. Those are limited to the weekdays between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. And then, as I said, that the generators have to be set back 100 feet. In order to make sure that that happens, the location has to be depicted on site plan when the applicants are requesting a zoning certificate. We also added a subsection covering violations and penalties. We list what constitutes a violation. We expressly permit the zoning inspector the opportunity to inspect sites if there is a suspected violation. We're allowing the zoning inspector to issue stop work orders as well as notices of violations, and we prescribe a penalty for violations for the provisions of the limited industrial district. So at this point, I will start sharing and answer any questions.
Any comments or questions for Elisa? We do have the opportunity to do that outside the public hearing as well. All right, I believe we're going to move on to public comment. But does anybody from staff have anything? Okay. Would anybody from the public like to speak this evening? All right. With that said, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing. Second by Mr. Ryba. Discussion. Roll call.
Mayor St. John.
Yes.
Mr. Gokenhour.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Ryba. Yes. Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
6 yeas. All right. Thank you. All right. We have the commission review zoning code amendment and the anticipated processes. Any commentary from the Planning and Zoning Commission, questions for staff, and ultimately commission action this evening. Start with comments and questions.
Once.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Marie.
I have lots of questions of clarification.
Okay, great.
I just got to get organized here. I think she answered my questions on solar energy systems and the integration of them. On page 6 of the LDI document, number 5, required design, landscaping, and site standards. 5B, number 4, I believe the last sentence, it says for a minimum of 50% of the frontage facade. I guess my question is, what can the other 50% be? Am I missing that?
As the ordinance is currently drafted, we are requiring the materials on the front of the building, but we are not necessarily mandating what those materials are for the other facades. We are prohibiting things like metal siding, on any facade that is visible from a right-of-way or a residential zoning district. But in terms of prescribing the materials, we are only doing that on the front facade.
Next page, number 7, it talks about prefabricated metal buildings, accessory structures built and operated for the purpose of enclosing equipment which are not occupied by persons on a regular basis may be constructed using prefabricated metal. Do we have a size limit on that anywhere in this documentation?
No, ma'am, we do not. We certainly could incorporate one if you would like to.
I was just curious if that needed to be addressed.
It's a policy call. We certainly could limit them to 200 square feet or 400 square feet to ensure that they are not going to, anyone that's not going to abuse this standard. The only qualifier right now is that it has to be a building that's not occupied on a regular basis. But other than that, there is no size requirement.
And then on signage, page 9,
Yes, ma'am.
do we have in this documentation, do we have any size restrictions, or are we referring back to the current zoning code?
No, ma'am, it refers back to the current zoning code with the prohibitions that are in the text, which is prohibiting roof signs and billboards. But the
Okay.
size limitations are all within the existing sign standards.
Okay. Next page, number 10. Hedgerow plantings.
Yes, ma'am.
I see we're allowing hedgerows. I guess my question there is, with the spacing that we have allotted, does that still allow for emergency vehicle access if they had to go between buildings for any purpose?
Certainly that would be permitted. If you would like for me to add a language that says openings for emergency vehicles are permitted, we certainly can do that as well, just to make it abundantly clear that the hedgerows themselves should not prohibit access by emergency vehicles.
Okay,
What page is that on, Joe? What
that was page 10, under hedgerow plantings, number 5.
Thank you.
Page 12, at the bottom, number 9, street trees. There's no list of street trees. Again, are we reverting back to the standard zoning code?
No, ma'am, what our intent will be that will be in the administrative policy as well. All the specifications in terms of types of street trees, as well as how they need to be staked and installed at the time of planting, will be at that administrative policy.
Okay. Page 13. At the very bottom, it talks about parking spaces, and
Yes,
that commission can reduce it up to 20%.
Correct.
I understand the whole reasoning of why we possibly would lower the numbers, but what happens if the business changes and now we have more employees that are now parking in somebody else's parking lot, or whatever the case may be? Is there anything in place to deal with that situation?
Those types of standards are typically within the zoning ordinance itself. I do not know whether your existing ordinance has the normal language that says something like, if a use changes, the building then has to provide the parking that's required for that use. But I will look to make sure.
Okay, thank you. Page 14. Sorry for all the questions.
Oh, no, you're fine.
On retention ponds, I've never really thought about it before, but do we have like a maximum depth of what a retention pond could possibly be?
So
We do
that's,
not.
go ahead.
We do not currently know.
Okay.
You mean depth of water?
Yes.
No, actually, we, well, I'm not sure if it's in the regulations, but you tend to want to have a minimum depth of 8 foot. But I don't think we reference a max depth. anywhere.
Okay. Thank you.
Was there a concern with any depth?
No, I mean, I noticed that we were on a 1 to 3 slope and whatnot, and it triggered in my brain, well, have we ever even talked about a maximum depth for somebody or whatever?
I know from what I've learned, any new retention or detention ponds, they have the shelves in them. So I mean, if the concern is, somebody drowning or somebody slipping down and the slope is steep, and in there are these platforms within detention ponds. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's a safety shelf on the edge of the pond as it goes in. It goes down at preferably shallower than 3 to 1, but possibly to 3 to 1. Then there's a 12 to 1 slope that's about a foot deep and about 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet long. And there's also a requirement for buoys, for life buoys to be mounted around the water surface.
Okay. Page 16, number 5. It refers to hazardous materials.
Yes.
And if anything changes, that they need to notify the city within 30 days. I really like that. I see this is new in here. Is that all? Are they also required to share that with emergency services, like the fire department and whatnot, so that they know what type of materials are in the city.
So I'm going to apologize. Do you have your own fire and police, or is that through another facility or another administrative?
We have the police and we have a joint fire district, as to one of the municipality and 2 townships.
Okay, so then why don't I add language to ensure that all emergency agencies are notified as well. So it's not solely on your responsibility to then notify both your police department and your fire districts.
And then also with the hazardous material, I didn't see it in the documentation, but I heard you speaking about if they have a violation for a hazardous material, they have to notify the village by within 30 days.
Yes, ma'am. So it's the next sentence down. It says, whenever a facility is cited by any state or federal agency for infractions in appropriate handling or storage of hazardous materials, the city has to be notified within 30 days.
My question would be, should that be sooner than 30 days? Because 30 days is a long time for us not to know something that's gone wrong. For instance, the train crash and the big chemical spill with that.
Right. Would you like me to change it to 15 days?
I'm just bringing up the questions. I don't have a recommendation.
I had a question. We added this is this typical for zoning codes to incorporate these type of notification timelines for what I would call infractions that are they are outside of our purview? Obviously we care, but if there are EPA issues or Department of Health issues, is it typical that zoning code is the right place for this particular language? I'm fine with it. I just want to make sure we're not being extremely restrictive or we're just out on some other plane relative to other zoning code.
It is not typical. It is not atypical for the language to have some sort of vague language about hazardous materials and being notified. I specifically put the number of days in there so that they had some responsibility to get it to you within a reasonable time. So while it's not necessarily typical, it's not atypical in and of itself. In many cases, this type of language would be in your general code of ordinances, but we went through your ordinances and you don't have that language within your general code. So it makes a fair amount of sense to put it here.
Fine. I mean, whatever you guys think. I think, I would like to track towards us voting on this tonight. So if we are going to make significant changes, or if these are issues that we're all convicted about, I think we need to make sure we're really explicit in what these days are, because this document will go for approval and to city council next. Do you want to move it to 15 days or?
Personally, I think sooner would be better.
Okay, is everybody generally in agreement with that? Any concerns? Okay. Alex, are you tracking all these changes?
No.
Who is tracking all these changes?
They'll be reviewed on the minutes after we're done, and I think Elisa also.
But we're going to be approving a document. We need to have, Elisa, you have these changes tracked, or at least the recommendations, because we're going to have to recite all of these on the way back through.
Yes, sir.
Before approval. Okay, yeah, thank you. Any others, Jeff?
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, good deal. Mr. Rabbit?
So going back to page 5 on the table,
Okay.
Just a couple of questions on it. First of all, Sunbury Parkway, is that going to be considered a state route?
It will either be a state or a US route, one or the other.
And then with the way it's worded, 'cause the picture of that one in New Albany, it doesn't face 605. It's turned sideways. So will it be 250 feet no matter which way it's facing from the state route or US route? So if it's facing a side road, if the side road goes off Sunbury Parkway, and it's facing that way, it still have to be 250 feet from Sunbury Parkway.
If it has a lot line that is on one of these streets, whether it's a principal arterial or a minor arterial, yes, it will have to be 250 feet, even if the building is catty corner on the lot.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else? All right,
Nothing.
Ms. Cooper? All right, so we're in. All right, can we maybe take a second to go back through Mr. Gokenhauer's comments? So we can. I think the last one that you mentioned on the 15 days, I think we're generally all in agreement. Can we go back? I was taking notes, but I didn't know if some of these were questions, recommendations, or edits.
So, Mayor, would you like me to start at the beginning?
Yes, please.
If you look on page, at least it's my page 6, under building materials, number 4, where it says primary building materials, the question was, are we regulating what the building materials are on facades that are not the front facade? And my response is that now we are not. So I'm not sure if we would like to perhaps require 50% of these materials on all facades, or what the commission's purview would like to be.
Is that the question, Mr. Gokenauer, or was it what? So it's basically, it's saying 50% have to be these materials at the front facade, right? And your question was, what other options are there for the 50%? And we limit some that say cannot be on the front facade. We're saying what 50% can be, and I think you have a valid point. What are the options? I mean, we're saying plastic is okay, or what?
If it's not
Siding.
Yeah, if it's not prohibited, it could be any number of other types of materials if it's not facing the front. And the only thing that we're prohibiting is metal siding, whether it faces a right of way or residential zoning district. And we're prohibiting reflective and mirrored glass.
Maybe I'm again misinterpreting. We're talking about the front facade.
No.
Yes, we are. 5B4.
Right.
But the front.
But no, that's not what Joe asked. I've got to lay that right down the hammer. We're talking about the remaining 50% of the requirement in item 5B4.
Correct. The remaining 50% could be any number of things, with the exception of what is already prohibited on the following page.
So it can't be precast metal. It can't be, I can't remember the other ones.
Can't be reflective or mirrored glass.
Okay. Joe, I kind of had the same question. Do we need to be prescriptive, or are we just saying I mean, it's similar to like a residential neighborhood. We say 25% of the front is going to be natural materials. The remaining is, I don't know, vinyl siding or something like that. Do we need to be prescriptive and say it needs to be something, or?
I think she answered it by saying that what is restricted is on the following page.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right, good deal. So no edits to 5B4. Okay. You got a question on page 7, item number 7.
Of the accessory structures.
And so this was, can you give us an example of what this would be? So it wouldn't really be a garage. This is really for material storage. Is that what we're saying here?
It could be material storage. It could be some sort of equipment shed, or any number of, or those kinds of things.
Would it be a warehouse?
It could be a warehouse if it's not regularly occupied by people. I do not know of any warehouse that's not regularly occupied, because otherwise it's dead storage. And dead storage certainly could be fairly large. You know, if it is, for example, equipment that is being stockpiled for use a year from now. So it could be dead storage, in which case it could be a fairly large size building. And so adding a size limit may be appropriate.
Accessory structure.
Yes, the current language says accessory structures built and operated for the purpose of enclosing equipment which are not occupied by persons on a regular basis may be constructed using prefabricated metal.
Maybe like a generator house or something like that.
A generating house, it could be manufacturing equipment that's going to be used a year from now. Because all we're saying is equipment. We're not necessarily saying it is mechanical equipment for the facility.
Any building of any size that's not regularly trafficked by humans is what I'm understanding.
Correct.
Meaning it could be as large as a huge warehouse and be constructed of primarily prefabricated metal.
Do we have any site size restrictions on accessory structures, either as a percentage of the main building, or is this addressed anywhere else that anyone can think of on site?
I'm looking at it right now. Your
Percentages, right?
There is section 810302 does deal with accessory buildings use of structure. It does not, as far as I see, contain a size restriction. It's throughout in other areas of the code for different districts also referenced. I don't see in any of them. It has issues about like the height being no higher than the highest peak of a building, but that would be particular to those other zoning districts.
What if it's a water tower? Is that an accessory use?
Storage.
It could be.
Yeah, so are we really trying to limit those types of things?
No, what this is attempting to do is really to limit to allow for buildings that are not necessarily used regularly to have a lesser building material is what this is doing. I would point out to you that we do not in this district differentiate in setbacks between principal and accessory buildings. So even if it is a fairly large structure, it's still going to have to be, for example, 100 feet from a residential district. So we are not in any way differentiating and allowing larger buildings that are accessory in nature to be closer to a lot line, which is common in other districts. But we, as someone has pointed out, we are not limiting the size of accessory structures anywhere through this document.
I know in our regular zoning code, I think how we get around that is based on lot coverage. So I think it's 25% if for this main structure. And then if you have accessory, it's an extra 5%. So it'd be 30% coverage. And then we have 75% coverage listed in here. So I suppose that's our way, that's our quote unquote, our maximum would just be based on percentage of the buildings that are taking over the plot.
But I think the concern is, and if I'm misstating, let me know, that we don't want someone to take advantage and have this as a loophole and have a large structure that is prefabricated metal. That does not meet the intent of the district of having high quality buildings. And it's theoretically possible that someone could attempt to do that, in which case we could limit the size much as the same as we did with the guard shacks, where we say they can be no larger than 200 square feet and be in the front setback. So we certainly could limit the size of this to make sure that no one abuses this out.
Anybody else have any comment? It's an accessory use, accessory building, populated by people.
What is routine? So if I came in only once a year, is that routine?
So I would say not, but your point is well taken, which is that it's up to interpretation. It says on a regular basis. I would say once a month. No, not regular, but every day would be regular. So again, what's that showing is that it's open to interpretation. So we could either limit the size, we could better define what regular basis means, anything that would give you comfort that someone's not going to abuse this ability to use prefabricated metal in this situation.
I recommend we put a size limit on it. If they want something bigger, they can always get a variance.
Yeah, I understand.
That way we don't have a loophole. That was my whole concern.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. I'm also trying to ensure that things that are what I would call normal business type things for like accessory uses aren't, they're coming for divergences on every single one of these. I mean, if they have a building that is an accessory use behind the main structure or something, why are we putting a limit on that? What harm is it doing? And it's like the equivalent of a residential shed, but for business.
They have the limitation, 100 square feet.
Okay.
That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the lot coverage thing makes more sense. I mean, it's more standardized versus saying we're going to put an arbitrary square footage number on it. I mean, like 5% of the total site or something like that. Alex, I know you're just off the cuff referencing percentages, but what is something like residential or?
Residential, I think most, if not all, is 25% for the main dwelling, and if there's any accessories, it's an additional 5%. So then the total lot coverage would be 30.
So the maximum lot coverage in this district by impervious surface is 75%. Typically, when you're talking about accessory, it is going to have to be defined as a normal accessory use to the principal use on the property. And by saying that, it has to be subordinate to it, which typically means that it is smaller in size. But again, all of this is up to interpretation.
That's very true.
And we do say, with the exception of that the accessory buildings or ancillary buildings have to be of a similar design and materials to the principal structure, with the exception of what we just talked about. And then if you look on page 8, we say accessory structures, generators, storage tanks, and similar accessory structures shall be located behind a building facade that does not have frontage on a public right of way. So we are requiring those types of accessory structures to be behind the front facade, behind the building facade.
They're going to be behind the building, like virtually not visible from the street.
Correct. And that is on page 8 in C2.
I mean, I think about like prefabricated metal buildings, like several of those on Kintner Parkway as the primary building. Like up against the road. Hitachi Astemo is like a prefabricated metal building. Is there any other feedback on this particular item?
I do have kind of a question. Downtown Columbus, it's an older building, and it has had an automatic delivery system that you could transport stuff from one building to another. Is that an accessory building? It was up off the ground. I guess it went over a highway or something a long time ago. So if it was like a pathway, like where it delivered, is that an accessory building, or is it, since it's connected, would it be different?
Definitionally speaking, if it is connected to the principal building, it is part of the principal building.
Okay, so it would be covered under that.
Correct.
Any other feedback? Okay, is there a recommendation for an edit here? What's that? Somebody say yes, no? Is there a recommendation for an edit?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. All right, what was the next one?
Okay.
The hedgerow? Or
Yes, sir. If you'll look on page
items? Or the items?
Page 10.
So it's for hedgerow planting and allowing, specifically stating that emergency vehicles there may be a break in the hedgerow to permit emergency vehicles access.
I said the wrong page, page 10, 5. I agree with the recommendation on that as an edit. Any other feedback on this one? Seems to make sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Good, all right, good on that.
Okay.
Street trees, there's a question, I think it was, are we following our existing code? Do we have a prohibited list or a permitted list?
We have a prohibited list for street trees and for like park trees, yard trees. So there's 2 separate lists, but there is a list of species of trees that you cannot have in both of those locations.
So I think the answer is we're following our broader code.
And also it will be listed in the administrative policy as well.
Any questions, edits, comments? Okay. All right, so on to, is it page 16, item C 5 or 6?
6.
I'm fine with the 15 days. Any questions, comments at 15 days? Okay.
Yes.
All right, 15 days. Item C6. Any other comments, edits, questions? Really good feedback. Any questions, comments, feedback for staff? Okay. All right. First, I want to say thank you. I know this isn't, we haven't made a motion yet, but thank you, Alisa. Excellent job, staff. I think this is the 3rd or 4th meeting that we've had on this particular topic. And I would like to make a motion for approval pending legal and Ms. Duffy Rogers comments and edits as necessary. Any questions or comments from our law director?
I would say, Mr. Mayor, that I would, in your motion, I would just recap exactly what those edits are. I would be more comfortable with that, simply because the language on council requires a 3/4 vote, they're making a modification.
Yeah.
And the 15 days.
Is it just the 2?
Mhm.
Okay. Can you reference page numbers?
Page 10.
I'd like to make a motion for approval with the following edits listed on page 10, item 5, to allow emergency vehicles adequate access in between hedgerow plantings.
Page 16.
And page 16, item C6, to reduce to edit, to notify the city within 15 days of receiving a citation. Any other comments?
And then I would just say maybe to give Ms. Duffy Rogers the authority to formalize those into that to present to council.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, we got a second by Councilwoman Cooper. Discussion. Excellent feedback. Roll call.
Mayor St. John,
Yes.
Mr. Gokenhour,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes.
Mr. Rybo,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
6 yeas,
Great job.
motion approved.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy Rogers.
Thank you all very much.
Take care. All right, we're on to the informal presentation of Eagle Creek Extension. We have a few members from the development team here. Will it be Mr. David Fisher that will be covering this, or Mayor Smith? All right.
Good being here.
Welcome back.
Thank you. That been so long.
Welcome.
Hi, David Fisher, Pepper Fisher, on behalf of the applicant. I got Jim Hills from Pulte and Gary Smith from G2, both familiar faces, I hope, to us all from the Eagle Creek deal we just got done. I have to say before I start, though, Mayor, I'm very impressed. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I never been able to get any of my children to come to my work. But what I learned from your children is you promised them dinner.
I did.
Now I have some grandchildren, maybe I'll promise them dinner and they'll show up, but 2 kids. David Fisher, here on behalf of the applicant. This is merely an informal tonight. We want to get this zoning in front of you to begin discussions with you. Given the schedule, it looks like we'll probably file in early November to come back to you with a formal application. And for your November meeting, I think it's going to be the week after Thanksgiving. I know there'll be some quorum issues and getting that arranged, so that's our plan at the moment. This is essentially an extension of the Eagle Creek subdivision. If you recall, we did that probably 6 months or so ago now, something like that. This is the next properties immediately south of the Eagle Creek properties owned by various members of the Rogers family. So once again, on the east side of 3B's and K going south, it's going to look very similar to Eagle Creek. There's going to be new amenities to talk about. We'll talk about some lot sizes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Smith from G2, who will go over the exact planning on this as we discuss it with you tonight. And once again, the plan is we hope we'll be back for you in late November for consideration of a formal application. Gary?
Thank you. Do we have the mic on? Is it on?
It is.
Okay, there we go.
David's just too tall and he didn't lean over far enough. Thanks, everybody. Gary Smith, T2 Planning and Design. It's good to see everybody again. We're pretty excited to bring this back to you. I know we've had some initial meetings with just staff and the mayor on the Tuesday morning meetings, kind of talking through this, but we're happy to present it for the larger group. This, as David mentioned, is really designed to be an extension of Eagle Creek. So some important things to note are this will be covered under the same homeowners association. So essentially all the open space, all of the amenities are going to be available to people to the north side and to the south side. This, for all intents and purposes, this will be one Eagle Creek development. And so what we've tried to do here is design an open space system and a network of trails that will connect up very nicely to the original Eagle Creek. So if you remember in Eagle Creek, we had a couple of different amenities, and then we had easier to see over here. I'm walking behind you. We had, we had trails that basically connected up all of these pocket open spaces and the large open space where we had the fields and the pavilions, and then the open space in the rear. And what we're really trying to do is connect that system up through the sidewalk or through the rest of the open space, so all of these other open spaces. So the goal really was to make this really feel as if it was just one continuous development, not as if we zoned it 2 times. Everything about this development is basically what you guys have already approved. The lot sizes, the lot standards, the density is almost exactly the same at 2.75. This is 2.78. Eagle Creek was 2.75. The lot sizes are very similar. The minimum lot size is 52. We also have 56 and 60-foot lots in there. One of the things that's important to note about the minimum lot size that we have are the minimum. So the 52-foot lots vary from 52 to 56. And so when you look at this, like a quarter of those lots are over 54 feet in width, similar to what we did on the original Eagle Creek. From an amenity standpoint, I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. So this is just kind of an illustrative version, just to kind of show you what our anticipation is in terms of the landscaping and everything else. Very much what we want to do is mimic Eagle Creek, the original zoning. And we've incorporated a number of different amenities in here so that there can be a lot of cross use from both developments. One is we've incorporated a dog park into the community. We've incorporated a splash pad for use of the residents, a picnic shelter with a restroom building in it, what we're going to call a kind of a jogging track, and pickleball courts, and then top lot and amenities. And I can hone in on that just a little bit further. You can see the dog park down here. And that's all connected up to this trail system that takes you back up, through both developments and through development. And if you'll go to the next slide. So this is a picture really of the central amenity area that you saw in the middle of the development. And so one of the things that we did, and I think this is even different from the meeting on Tuesday, Mayor, one of the things that we changed was we took this, instead of this being a sidewalk, we made this entire thing a mixed use trail, a jog path. Because once we really started taking a look at this, we realized that this is actually over a quarter of a mile around, it's almost a half mile around the perimeter of that. So it makes functionally, it makes an excellent kind of exercise jogging path for the residents. So splash pad, and then the pavilion here, the picnic pavilion, the restroom buildings are on one side of this and the other side. And then the top lot here. And so if you're a parent, you come in, sit in the shade of the picnic pavilion, and you may have 1 or 2 kids over at the splash pad. You may have another kid over at the top lot. And then also pickleball courts. We've got a couple of pickleball courts, which is tremendously fast growing spoiled, as you can imagine. I'm sure you've heard about. So that's really, kind of the highlights of what we're trying to accomplish here. We think this is a great amenity structure, that can be shared by both developments. Ultimately, splash pad is a feature. I think that's pretty exciting because for us, it kind of gives opportunity for kids of all age ranges. I mean, infants can go in there basically in a diaper, kind of walk through the splash pad. People who have limited mobility can access those areas as well. They're very great for exercise, cooling off, recreation. So we're excited to have that feature in the development. With that, I think if you want to go back to the slide right before that, to the master plan, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
First of all, I'd like to say I really like what you did with the multi-purpose area in the middle. You answer a lot of my questions. I'm like thinking, why are you cutting up all this green space with crisscross paths?
Right.
I think you did a really good job of changing that. I will commend you on that. I love how you put the shelter in the middle, like you said. The only recommendation I personally would make on your multi-purpose area that
Other one.
where it's blown up, yeah. Is as we look at that, the path that goes through the middle, maybe removing the one that's to the left, just so you have that nice big open green space, so that, and I also like how you laid it in the middle, so you can still have a football game going on the left and kickball over on the right, or whatever. You got lots of green space. It looks like it's really usable.
So you're saying take this leg,
Yes.
take that leg out? Okay. I mean, I think that's something we can consider.
And then the other thing, in our drawings, you did not have the connectivity from the original Eagle Creek by path along 71, but I noticed you've changed that also.
We made that revision. But that was one of the things I think that came out of the meeting on Tuesday. I wasn't able to attend. I was dealing with some things with my wife.
We almost didn't have the meeting because you weren't there.
Well, that's what I thought, but I think we'll manage without.
We tried through.
You did.
And Gary, two things you might want to point out is there are restrooms in the shelter house. They're
Yep.
which is a new thing for us, but with all the activity going on there, that's important. And Mayor, I trust you also saw that we did have that connection to the south. There, as we talked about our meeting from the dog park right here.
Yeah.
As well as the additional trail stations that we put in coming off that meeting. So I think we added everything that we talked about that most recent meeting with administration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We were happy to answer.
I actually have a question. I love that it's joining, putting them together, but I know as with the splash pad, people are gonna drive their car from the other side, and I only saw like 2 parking spots. Is there gonna be enough to park along the way on the side?
Yeah, we're actually going to allow on-street parking there.
Okay.
On-street parking on one side of the street, so it'll be opposite the fire hydrant. And so what we can do is we can put fire hydrants on this side of the street and then allow on-street parking around kind of the perimeter of that.
I think another comment in that regard, we talked about this in our meetings with the administration mayor. These amenities are owned and maintained by the homeowners association between groups. We're not so foolish to understand that other people aren't connected and do stuff. And that's fine, that's what happens, but I think the issue first when folks manage that process so you don't have all sun rays.
Right, I just know as a parent and a grandparent that walking from the other side to that is not gonna happen with toddlers. Mhm.
But then, you're right, but then again, there's a lot of nice amenities that we put in for Creek one more, same thing, that there is gonna be some diversity back.
Yeah.
It's gonna be limited, probably older children that can ride bikes and walk there.
And I wasn't asking for a lot, I just wanted to make sure that there was parking available.
Yeah, I think there will be. Like I said, the perimeter of that's over almost a half mile. So there's going to be some on-street parking available there around the perimeter of that park.
Think of the little brown jug and put in a parking space. Yeah, all that whole perimeter of the track will be parking.
And did I miss where you were putting the mailboxes?
So mailboxes are gonna be scattered around the development. I think right now we're just showing, we haven't gotten a complete detail, but I think we're showing one here. I think we're showing one here. And then I think we have one over here by the dog park as well. We may even have one up here. But we're gonna take a close look at that, see how they divide out so we can get kind of spread out the mailboxes, throughout the community.
Okay.
So that, the lower right, those houses down there, how close is that to the highway?
Down here?
Yeah.
Oh, over here?
Yeah.
I'm not sure on what the exact distance is. I think they're probably over 200 feet away from the highway.
And you're gonna keep the trees there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
no,
trees are
that's
gonna be, we're not gonna remove those trees. If we do a path in the trees, it's probably gonna be something where we just go out and identify where the trees are, work the path around it, and may end up being a crushed gravel path, so we don't have to dig out the root systems, those kind of things. Yeah, but the intent is for those trees to stay.
Is there any intention to do any additional buffering between this development and the existing homeowners?
Cross previous day.
Well,
Like to the south.
between the retaining ponds, there's a house,
To the south, there's
and then to the south, there's
that, what is this? This is.
It's like a telecommunications
That's
tower.
communication tower.
They own this all the way back up to 3.
There's a road in between that and then
There's all the way back here, that runs to that tower, and then there's like a 50-foot strip of property that runs all the way out. It's owned by the tower, and that's all trees essentially.
okay.
And we will have additional landscaping in here. We just haven't got that far with the detail. Our treatment along, our intent is to continue the same landscape treatment that we have along the road, along Eagle Creek Phase 1, down again further to the south.
probably 100 feet from the lot and then maybe 130 from the home. It's probably
Down there,
from the closest home to actually where a home would back up. Was that your question,
I think
Joe?
it's probably closer to 200 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. Just looking at the scale, transferring that, it's 200 feet, 180 feet, somewhere there.
Any questions, Mrs. Cooper or Mr. Lawrence? Comments?
This is a fresh new look. I like this. This is different than what we've been seeing, and I think our residents will appreciate it. I know the city council, specifically our Parks and Rec committee, often get asked about splash pads and pickleball courts, and I like that it's not just a plain open green space. And I really like the track around it because I think you're going to find moms and teens
moms
and
and dads.
tweens and grandparents and all the folks will really get a lot of use out of that, especially with the kids that are a little bit older and can manage on their own in the middle while the caregivers are walking. I really like it.
Yeah, I think that's gonna get a lot of use.
We always have to remember too, this whole issue of amenities and their maintenance that are paid for by the homeowners association. That's why blending these two results in more revenues and hopefully lower dues to maintain them. But we're adding amenities here, we're gonna have some costs over the years. So the goal is to provide a high level of high quality amenities that are affordable to the residents, not only when they buy their home 20 years.
Mhm.
There's a dynamic that
If I could actually tell some faulty thoughts. Going back to Eagle Creek, we had a lot of discussion back and forth about the amenities that were part of Eagle Creek. We heard what you had to say. We designed these amenities here so to be complementary to Eagle. But more than in addition to what we had in Eagle Creek based on the feedback we got.
Yeah, okay. It's great.
Yeah, different and complementary.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Different and complementary.
Mhm.
I like it. think that's exactly how you explained it, Rick. That's what you were looking for on this one.
Where's the palm trees?
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know. Few more years, might be warmer.
Any other feedback from the commission?
Thank you for your time.
We'll see you in a month.
Appreciate it.
See you in November. Hopefully, we are.
Thank you.
very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think that was kids have a nice place.
That's right. That's why I'm trying to wrap it up. We're all hungry. I see that showed me the time on the walk. Thank you very much. All right, we're on the visitor section. There are any visitors that would like to speak with the Planning and Zoning Commission this evening, Scarlett?
I think they should be required to speak.
All right, I think they're hungry. We're on to motion to approve the minutes. I think we're going backdated a little bit, July 24th and August 28th. Would we like to make a combined motion on both sets of minutes?
I'll move to approve the July 24th and August 28th minutes.
You got a motion on both sets of minutes?
Second,
Second by Mr. Gokenhour. Discussion? Roll call?
Mayor St. John.
Yes.
Mr. Gokenhour.
yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Riva. Yes. Ms. Miller.
Yes.
All right, no zoning report tonight. Oh, there is a
Report tonight.
Oh, okay.
You want to skip it? You already
No, I
got
was just
it.
trying to move right along.
All right, we'll go quick with the zoning report. General update, we had a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting with 3 different variance requests this past month. 2 of them were denied. 1 of them was approved. Do you guys have any questions, want any more details about that at all?
Okay, we trust the delineation of power of the BZA. Thank you.
The last of the Sunbury building permits has been inspected. So Al finished his last inspection. So now all of our inspections are going through the county officially. We met with Esri to go over potential uses of GIS. Me and Alyssa did, just looking at what we can do, how it can help us, where we can implement it, and what kind of uses it'll have in Sunbury when we get it up and running. They sent us a few templates and programs to see. So right now me and Alyssa are both working on a cemetery one, kind of platting out the cemetery in GIS, having a map, hopefully, well, ideally being available on the website. So you can click and see what plots are open, where everyone is buried. If you want to look up who your family member is, that's kind of our end goal, but very early on, and we're still learning the system, but that's kind of the idea we have, and hopefully we can implement those kind of things for other uses in Sunbury as well.
Like street trees. I love what other cities do with street trees and mapping those and talking about the quality.
That is, we started that as well with the estates, at least very, very early as well. Yeah, just looking at the ones that the plan is, like the conditions of them. So our low condition ones we've marked at this point, and then kind of conversations about if we want to go and mark all of them in the conditions of them, or how we want to take that approach too. But that is something that's kind of our test dummy of using GIS. So
That's great. Thank you.
phone inquiries, just looking at road conditions, application and permit processes, and then general zoning questions like, do I need a permit for this, that? And then walk and drove around to observe conditions as we're finally in the fall weather. I think walking is a lot better this time. Violations, we had 6 residents for different kind of violations regarding grass and just condition notices, cars parked in grass, expired tags in driveways, things like that. 2 businesses received gas and weed notices. I've talked to both of them since then. Both issues have been fixed. Permits issued, we only had 6 zoning certificates issued this month, with I believe only 2 of them being new builds. We had 6 occupancy permits and then 5 other permits, 4 being fences and 1 being a sign. Rolling Hills had 4 occupancy permits, Price Pond with 2 and 1, and then Miller's Cove with 1 new occupancy permit as well. As you can see, we were down only 2 new build permits this month. I think as the months are going on, we're
As of right now, like we only had 2 new build permits from September.
whatever dates were on the front of this is what it is. I've had a few since that, so it's not straight month of September, but since the last meeting to right now, or to Thursday,
Yeah.
I believe, when I handed up the packets, that was it, yeah. So I've gotten more than that already since that date has went up to right now, but yeah, just for whatever reason, it was a lower month. Based on the year, we are at 120, so we need 9 more to beat our total from last year, and we're still way ahead on all the years prior to that. And that is it. Any questions on anything?
Questions? Thank you very much. Great job. All right, discussion, new business. All right, next meeting, October 23rd. Rydell? Adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Rick Rydell, second by Joe St. John. Discussion. Roll call.
Mayor St. John.
Yes.
Mr. Gokenhour.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Ryba. Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Yes, approved.
Thank you. very much.
Yeah.
We're going to Vegas in February.
If I leave this.
I was just saying about,